Hello there, Sir from 17 once again, introducing you to a nice little topic video which I probably don't do enough, because my channel has a couple of tried and tested things that go on it that people enjoy, and I do the walkthroughs and sometimes I do fun videos, but topics often get left for the guides I don't have a space to really talk about anything else. So this video right now is going to be titled DmC, probably a colon in there, and Devil May Cry, because not a lot of people are like myself or like a lot of people listening, and that is pretty invested Devil May Cry fans. And I'm going to basically talk about my experience with the demo that we're going to be receiving on both the PlayStation Network and on the Xbox Marketplace extremely soon. I think it's the 30th of November it's coming up. That is not, 100% the date. I haven't read this story in a while. I'm just going off a ball's memory here. And I've played that demo. I've played that demo 4 times, and I've had a lot of interesting discoveries with it, had a lot of fun with it, and I played it all at a convention in Manchester. I went to Eurogamer, and before I get into the in-depth analysis, I'm going to pretty much say I apologise for the lack of videos over the last few days, guys. I went to see my girlfriend. She lives in York, if you know of the English map, and I went to see her for 5 days. And her internet is notoriously dog shit, so for some reason it wasn't great, and I couldn't really get on and interact as much as I wanted to. I don't blame her or the internet, I just blame, the karma of everything. I did upload a bunch of videos before I went, and I was unlisting them as I go, but it was generally 1 video a day, and I've picked up quite a lot of new subscribers recently who might be wondering what's happening, and I'm usually a lot more regular than that, so don't worry if you're listening to this. But it is what it is, and there's actually a really funny story that one of my subscribers is going to just deliciously enjoy. I pre-ordered Halo 4, and I got a confirmation email onto my account basically saying that, it was getting ready to be sent, effectively. They were just taking the payment, all that good stuff, on Friday. It comes out in my country on the Tuesday. I think it's a universal launch, so it's a Tuesday everywhere, and I got a message from my mum on Saturday. Basically, I was asking if the game had come, and she said yes, and I was like, yay, I've got Halo 4 early, so when I get back on Monday, which is today, I can start the guide immediately, get tucked in. And a friend of mine basically told me how he was going to be playing the first level of the new Halo campaign through his work, and we were throwing shit back and forth a little bit like guys do, and I basically said that I had it at home waiting for me to try and make him jealous, and it might have, it might not have, it probably did, because he's that kind of guy. And when I've got home, it turns out the game that has come is my love film game and not Halo 4. So when I went to check my account, it turns out that there's been some problems with my bank account details, because I have a new card that's not actually valid yet, and there was some confusion over that. So I'm probably going to the midnight launch in about 3 hours, and I'll keep you, detailed about those details, so to speak. But we're 4 minutes deep, and I haven't even spoken about Devil May Cry, so I should probably do that now. So the new Devil May Cry, everybody who's a fan of the old games is up in arms about the difference in Dante, about how the game looks slow, about this, about that. You need to turn all that off, guys. You need to stop that shit. It's unnecessary. If you like Devil May Cry, you have 4 games that you can play that each have captured a certain moment in greatness of Devil May Cry. And play those games if that's what you want, because this new game is not those games. It isn't. It is something familiar but different, and different in a really good way. The first thing that a lot of people are going to trip over is the controls, because anyone who's had their hands around the high definition collection or Devil May Cry 4 will know that Devil May Cry is not necessarily a light and heavy attack game. It's not a combination of those 2 elements. It is generally a game with an attack button, a gun button, and then you use the lock-on to modify those attacks. And this game, I don't think it has that kind of feature to it, because if I'm completely honest, I can't remember if I was locking on or if the game was just doing it automatically, because I can't remember what lock-on was. And the reason I know this is the left and right bumper. Left bumper usually did Devil Trigger, right bumper usually locked on. You could obviously change these in the options, but for the most, R1 was your lock-on mode, and R1 or the right bumper on this game does not lock on, it evades. They have mapped an evade button, just like Devil May Cry 2, to both the R1 and L1s, or the bumpers, and it's really weird, guys, it really is, because my hands have played so much Devil May Cry that they know what they're doing when I put the game in. It's an old familiar moment, they know that sensation, they know the feeling, they do their duty, and we just work with it, because I know those games. And I found myself throughout the entire time of maybe the first 3 playthroughs of the demo, maybe 2, I think I got around it after a while, rolling all the time by accident, because I was trying to do combat modifiers, and this is not how the game works. So a lot of people that were watching me at this convention were looking and probably thinking either this guy's insane and doesn't know how to play, or this guy thinks he's an absolute badass at the game and is doing all these fancy evasions, and I didn't mean to. It was just literally I was fucking rolling by pressing the wrong button. And it's kind of funny because the roll is an evade button, but I couldn't quite get the iframes down. I couldn't figure out what part of the roll was the safest, so I actually towards the end started using the jump, just like I do in the other Devil May Cries, because there's only been one game with an evade. Devil May Cry 3 and 4 both had the feature to evade if you used a specific style, but I never really went that way once I got good at the jumping. And on this game, the jump seems to be just as effective, but I don't have the timings as well as I do the other games for obvious reasons. I didn't have too long with the game. But that is the first thing you're going to notice that might be jarring. The second thing you might notice, and this is probably more of a PC guy thing than anything else, is the game does not run at 60 frames per second. The frame rate has been cut in half, and I didn't notice any slowdown. I didn't notice any really performance issues as far as dropping the frame rate. I didn't notice any of it. The game does feel slower, but I think it's slower because the combat is a little bit more methodical, and it's intentionally being designed to not quite be as fast and frenetic. Don't get me wrong, there is still speed to it, and if you know what you're doing, you can dispatch enemies very quickly, but it's not, you know, turbo mode on Devil May Cry 3, and if you're expecting that, you're going to be disappointed. There was 2 aspects to the demo that I got to play. The first one was a level. The second one was a boss fight, which did not do the game much justice whatsoever, which I'll talk about in a moment. The level was the streets that you've seen all the way through all the advertising, all the promotional stuff. Basically, it's a really cool looking city which looks a little bit too close to the city off of Bayonetta, if I'm honest. The invisible people and stuff like that, it's a little close to something else. It's not identical, but there are parallels which I'm not going to complain personally, because I love that aesthetic. I love being in cities, being in towns, being in domestic areas. To me, that is great, it's cool, but it has to be handled well, and I can firmly say that this seems to be handled very well. The level itself is not too big, it's not too expansive, but there is still freedom to it. There's a couple of avenues to look down. It's not all scripted, you know, running one section. There is exploration, and the first objective that you get is to find these CCTV cameras that have got these eyes in them, and you need to rip their eyes out. And what this introduces you to as you're playing is this concept of having essentially the devil arm off of Devil May Cry 4. It is the ability to use a whip on this game, which will pull enemies towards you or pull you towards platforms, and it works exactly the same, and it's just as great as it was in 4, and it's going to be just as lethal in this game, because any enemy it looked when I was fighting, except perhaps the heavier guys, but I didn't test it on them, could be interrupted with the whip. So you're doing a combo on a dude near you, there's a guy to your right sneaking up on you, you knock the first guy into the air, you immediately spin, do the whip, pull the guy, stop him from doing his attack, combo him, and then you're juggling 2 of them. And stuff like that is exactly what Devil May Cry is about, and it feels just as good as it's ever felt. Where things start to get a little bit different in this level is when you're taking on a whole bunch of enemies. Enemies spawn from walls now, they come out of the geometry, which is a cool visual effect, but it's almost identical to the concept of the older games where they just kind of materialize there and then, so you're not going to be missing anything. The areas do lock themselves down just like they've always done, so there's nothing new there. The combat is really different. I didn't have long enough with it to know how to do certain stuff. Like, for instance, I saw a guy do the 1,000 stabs off of, you know, pretty much all the Devil May Cries, where Dante, you do a specific input of commands, and Dante starts spearing his sword, like, you know, Kenshiro from Fist of the North Star, and it's a buffering technique. It's really good at holding enemies, it's really good at bumping up your stylish meter, all that good stuff, but I couldn't figure out how to do it. And I tried all the input commands that it did it on the previous games because it was different, and it just wouldn't do it for me. But I did watch a guy who was just completely bashing the buttons, and he did it perfectly. So maybe you've got to do a specific command that I wasn't doing, and it is in the game. It looks the same. I don't know how it feels because, like I say, I didn't get my hands on that specifically, but it felt okay. The one thing that I don't know about so far is how deep some of the controls are going to be, because everybody knows the Stinger. If you're a Devil May Cry fan, you know the Stinger. It is the single most useful distance-crossing, enemy-interrupting attack in the series. Aside from the second one where it was like he had a floppy arm, he was like Artorias and he just couldn't be asked to swing. That was lazy. Hated it. This game has a Stinger, and the Stinger looks good, but I do not know for the fucking life of me how I did it. And I believe it was a circle command. And what I mean by this is, because there's no apparent lock-on to use as a modifier, because before it was right bumper forward and attack, I was messing about with commands trying to do it, and the first move I found when I was messing about was the drive. And for anybody that doesn't know, if you had Swordmaster on Devil May Cry 3, if you, I believe, held the attack button, or it might have been actually right bumper, R1, back and circle, Dante would start charging his sword up behind his back and it would go red, and he did a 3-piece combo that fired the equivalent of a sonic boom. In 4, they streamlined it to just hold the attack button and it did the same thing. This game has that exact same attack, and it's just as effective as it always was. It's good for stylish points, it's good for distance, and it's good for knockdowns. And it's in the game. But when I did the Stinger, it seemed like I did a full circle on the analog, and then as I pushed forward, as I finished the circle, I pressed attack, and he did a Stinger. And Lummy was actually with me at the time, where I repeated it 2 more times, and it worked. And that seemed to be the command, and to me, introducing, you know, half circles and full circles in Devil May Cry is kind of not my idea of Devil May Cry. That's more of a Ninja Gaiden thing, and I don't know if it's true. I don't know if it's just me fucking up the input and thinking that I had to do all these ridiculous motions and I didn't. I'm not sure, guys, but if it is, it's kind of weird, and I can confirm that later on when I tried to do it, it didn't work. So I don't know if you need a lock-on. I don't know what the details are for that, but when the demo drops, all of this will be figured out because I will be devouring it. But moving on, there is a gun attack button, there is an attack button, and there is a special attack button. So instead of having a modifier, you now have a special attack that works a lot like the special button for Swordmaster in the styles of previous games. And what they've done here to incorporate weapons, I don't know how switching's going to work because they didn't give you enough, but if you hold the left trigger, you will use, I believe, the angel weapon, which is Osiris, and Osiris is essentially a hockey stick with a blade on the end. Like Casey from Turtles, like a full-on bad motherfucker. And when you're holding it and you press the attack button, you will attack with this weapon as you would with Rebellion or whichever sword Dante seems to be using. I didn't pay too much attention to the sword. And you can do input differences with commands. You can do it just like you always could with any other weapon. And when you press B or circle on the PlayStation pad, it does the modifier of that weapon, so it's a special attack with that weapon. And the angel and the demon arms seem to have special attacks depending on distance and where you are. So for instance, when you're in the air, you'll do a specific... Well, the mic just cut off for some reason, do apologise, but as I was saying, when you're in the air, you'll do a specific attack, and you'll do one on the ground, and there might be some inputs that you can do that change these attacks. I didn't have too much time with them, like I say, but the angel is on the left. On the right, when you hold the right trigger, is the axe. I can't remember the name of the axe, but this is the weapon that you use to break guards of enemies that are blocking. This is the enemies that you'll use to definitely launch things. It's kind of your power attack, the fuck you move you're going to be using. And the cool thing about this system is they all integrate really well with each other. So you can start a combo with Rebellion, the sword. You can then launch an enemy, because there's actually a launch button now. Instead of having to hold back while you were locked on and the R1 modifier to knock them in the air, they've got rid of that now. There is one button that will knock people in the air, and it is the special attack of the sword. It knocks people up, you jump up with them, you can then continue the combo with Osiris holding the left trigger, do a couple of quick spins with it. You can then swap to the Ebony and Ivory, which are always equipped on the X button. which is square, I believe, on PlayStation. And then you can go back to Rebellion, you can then come down with them with the axe using your demon arm, and there is a wealth of different abilities to string together, and I've seen the upgrade paths too of each of the weapons, and each weapon seems to have a whole bunch of different attacks. So by the time you get to the equivalent of New Game Plus, you are going to be able to do so much with these weapons, and chaining them together is literally going to be limited by your creativity and your skill on the pad. And that to me is brilliant, because it shows that they've obviously took the time to look at what people liked. They're modernising it to a respect where it's easy to use, but to get really high ratings and to do it well still needs the kind of timing and the kind of knowledge that you had before in the older games. The platforming felt fine. Some of the button prompts, for instance, when you jump into the air, you press 2 buttons at the same time to do the glide move. Occasionally I'd press it and it wouldn't pick up on the feedback, which was a little bit annoying. I did come across a couple of niggles with responsiveness, but only on occasional moments. Like I'd press jump and there would be a delay in the input. A couple of things that have probably been tweaked or are probably in the tweaking form. There was one really big thing that bugged me, but it's been a while since I played it now, guys, so unfortunately I forgot and I can't divulge that. One thing that I absolutely creamed over when I was playing it was the jump cancelling. Anybody that played Devil May Cry 3 will know that a lot of the good players, a lot of the really, really talented and skillful players learned about an exploit in the game that enabled you to deal massive damage extremely quickly by jumping off an enemy to cancel an attack, to then re-engage that attack and cancel out of it. So instead of waiting for the full attack to go through, that could take perhaps, you know, a whole second, you were taking a fraction of the time and you could repeat it for as long as you were able to do, dealing significant amounts of damage much quicker than anyone would have thought possible. And people link these into stylish combo videos. They also link them into, you know, no business, just absolute boss destructions. And it's something that does take timing, but anybody can learn. And once you learn it, not only does it feel good and look good to me personally, I know a lot of people are bored of it, but it's just so rewarding to get that chain of attacks happening and to keep that enemy suspended in air. And not only did I jump cancel with the sword, I jump cancelled with the Osiris. I couldn't get it to work with the big axe, but I was jump cancelling between sword and Osiris just like you would with, for instance, with Cerberus, and it felt good, guys. It felt spot on. My timing, I've not played a Devil May Cry in a while, so my timing, albeit wasn't great, but I was getting them in at least a 6 or 7 hit chain before I was either cocking the timing up or I was finishing it with another move, and I love jump cancelling. 4 didn't really have too much of it. There's certain bosses you could do it on, there's certain attacks that let you do it on, but for the most, it wasn't a massive element, and that was a shame in my opinion, because I loved the jump cancelling, but it's back with a vengeance on DmC, and I think it's going to really, really make it worthwhile. Lastly is the boss fight. The fight is against this giant slug lady who you've seen on numerous trailers, numerous exposures, and Dante and her do curse like sailors at each other, and you fight her, and you fight her in a very similar method to the way that you fought the giant statue before Sanctus on Devil May Cry 4. And what I mean by this is there is a selection of suspended platforms all around the arena that at any moment you can use the whip or the devil arm to teleport you to the next area by swinging across. And there's actually a lot of strategies that involve you doing that very specific method. And the boss fight is kind of bad, guys. It is kind of bad. The fight itself is fine, but they make you do it too much. And anyone who's played Resident Evil 6 recently knows that when a boss just wasn't... just lose your words mid-sentence. When a boss just again, what's wrong with this word? I want to say will not and doesn't, but I'm kind of creating like that. That's not even language. Linguists will analyse this and wonder what the fuck I was taking at the time. No, that does not die, that refuses to die. There is nothing worse than that, and this boss is very along that line. You kind of fight it the exact same way 3 times, and if you're not good at figuring out what you're supposed to do against the boss, it keeps getting its life back, so it's There's a part of me that wants to say it is kind of a bad boss fight, but it's not bad enough so that I hated doing it. Because I did enjoy the fight, I just hated the fact it made you do it repeatedly. And I think the reason I disliked it was because the game is clearly capable of better, and this is what they decided to show, you know, to entice new players. And Lummy was sat at the side of me. He's not a Devil May Cry player. He's not really that kind of action game player at all. Those third-person, you know, action RPG type deals. And the boss just didn't impress him at all, because he saw the mechanics of it. He saw through the fancy designs, the particles. He saw that this is a boss you have to fight ad nauseum a couple of times because it refuses to die and it thinks it's been epic, when really it's been lazy. That is definitely a problem, but you dodge the boss's attacks. It's got like a foreskin on its head, which kind of shuffles back and exposes the core of its forehead, which is its weak spot. You can hit its hands to knock it down, or hit its legs, but the head is really what you want to aim for. And I found that dodging the attack, then going for the head as it's exposed, is the best way to finish it. And if you stun it and it doesn't fall over, hit anything. Hit its legs, hit every part of it to knock it over. Then when you knock it over, you can do massive damage to it, and you can build your stylish rating really high. And once you stun it enough, it's a quick time event where you use the whip, a la Devil Arm, to pull out these cables. Once you pull 2 of the cables out, the boss then, you know, takes you to the next stage, but he keeps getting a lot of life back. And you do this for quite a while, and then there's a final sequence that involves, you know, very meticulous planning to do, where you have to, there's a rock that you've got to jump on, then you've got to swing across to another rock, then you've got to jump to another rock, and then you've got to finish the boss. And if you deviate from this plan, it's like the scripted moments from Uncharted. If you're not running where the camera wants you to run, you're dead. It's just that simple. You're just going to get washed to sea. And this is the same. I even went to do the whip, the animation, you know, to go across a distance, and it didn't work. The input just failed, and that was really weird, because I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I pressed the buttons to what I wanted it to do, and it didn't work. And I think that was just one of those rare bugs that you get in almost every game, but it stuck with me because it was a little bit annoying. Dante does have white hair in this game, but he only has white hair at a very specific moment, and that's when you use the Devil Trigger. The Devil Trigger in this game is extremely stylized. There's a couple of elements to it that I do not like. The first one is it inverts all the colours of the screen, so everything goes kind of white, and you go red and white, which is fine. I don't mind that at all. It does all the standard tropes of probably making you stronger, making your life regenerate. I didn't really pay too much attention to those meta points. What it didn't do is turn you into a demon, which, you know, a lot of purists are probably going to be curious about that, and I don't know if it's because they've intentionally made it that way so it doesn't ruin what the demon form is, but you didn't look much like a devil. You look like a dude who just had a dye job. The thing that I don't like the most about the Devil Trigger is they've combined a style that veteran players will know, and even new players will know. Quicksilver. The Bangle of Time from the original Devil May Cry. It was an item that you used to freeze time. It took Devil Trigger to use it, but it was well worth it because it was really fun to use. When you enter Devil Trigger, time slows down, and I don't know if this is intentional so that they can use it as a mechanic to platform, to give you some kind of strategic encounters against enemies or bosses. I'm not entirely sure how they plan to use it, but one thing is for sure, the enemies freeze when you enter it, and when you knock them into the air, they don't move, and it's a little bit jarring, and it's going to definitely take some time getting used to, because I'm not used to that. A lot of people will not even notice it, but I did, and I wanted to share that point. Didn't pick up any other guns to my knowledge. Music, a couple of it sounded a little dubsteppy, but you know, some dubstep can be good when it's not over the top and consistently trying to, you know, fucking wub your face off like Wobba Fett. The UI looks interesting, shall we say. It's not to my tastes, but I don't think it's bad. I'm just not a fan of white on everything. Everything is white. It looks like it's been stamped by a graffiti artist, and I know it's intentional, guys. I know it's the aesthetic. All I'm saying is I like old school health bars, you know. There's something about, you know, those bars being there like jewels on a screen that just makes a lot of sense to me, and I do enjoy it, but it makes sense for the fiction, it makes sense for the area. Virgil is in the game. I saw him. He looks pretty fucking awesome. He looks, you know, he looks a bit like a nerd, but I'm sure he's going to be a cool fight, and I'm sure he's going to be pretty interesting. I saw the girl who's part of Dante's storyline. I saw a lot of the conversations between both of them. The enemies that I fought all seemed pretty interesting. They were aggressive, but they were just passive enough so that you could combo them. There were a couple that have a big shield that you have to use a specific weapon to kill, so there's going to be a lot of things that, you know, you start off with one weapon to weaken them, and then you finish them with others. There's these really annoying cherubs that are back, which we've fought variants of them before. On this game, they're probably going to be the thing that breaks your multiplier the most, breaks your stylish rating, just because they can be a pest. But they can be whipped down with the whip. You know, you can do a lot of damage to them. You can immediately get to them using another feature of the whip. There's a lot that this game has to offer, and I do think when a lot of people play it, they might change their mind, because even if you are the most die-hard Devil May Cry fan that wants Devil May Cry 1 every time and has been subtly disappointed with every iteration for different reasons, you're still going to find something you like, because this is a good studio making a good game with a good license. And although it's not going to be a Capcom Devil May Cry, it's also going to benefit from not being a Capcom Devil May Cry. If it's to everyone's tastes, we're going to find out in January. Is it to my tastes? Fuck yeah it is, because I don't need it to be the same as the old games. I have those old games sat on my desk. I can play those at any time. I want something new, and this is exactly what the series needed. And from me, I say have faith, play the demo, see if it's for your liking. Who knows, this could be your Resident Evil 6, this could be your Brink, but regardless of your opinion towards it, it is a good game, and it's gonna be a good game. But thanks for listening to me rant for 27 minutes, and as always, you take care now.